factories with chimneys out of which interminable serpents of smoke trailed themselves forever and ever and never got uncoiled. But over time, as nations and cities adjusted to the upheaval brought on by rapid change, something close to miraculous happened. For millions of people, life got immeasurably better as they gained access to mass-produced goods, clothes, furniture, books, and automobiles. As business increased, so did job opportunities. A middle class emerged. Literacy spread. Incomes rose. People began to live much longer. Free enterprise was not solely responsible for these changes, but it had a great deal to do with them. If you want to see the stark difference between life with free enterprise and life without it, search the internet for North Korea night photo. Take a look at one of the nighttime satellite images of North Korea, a country run by a harsh dictatorship that controls the economy, and neighboring South Korea, a vibrant republic where free enterprise thrives. The darkness of North Korea is a sobering sight. Yes, there is a troubling side to free enterprise. There are booms and busts. People get laid off, sometimes at the worst of times, as companies watch their bottom lines. In some parts of the world, workers labor in sweatshops. But overall, the effects of free enterprise have improved people's lives in countless ways. It is difficult to imagine what life would be like without mass-produced electric lights, washers, telephones, medicines, vaccines, motors, pens, soap, tires, and the list goes on and on. As Peter Weiner and Arthur C. Brooks write in their book, Wealth and Justice, The Morality of Democratic Capitalism, to which this chapter is indebted, the history of the last 3 centuries is indisputable. The rewards and benefits of capitalism far outweigh the drawbacks. In our view, it is not really a close call. Doesn't free enterprise make some people rich while others remain poor? The median pay package of CEOs at large American companies was over $10 million in 2013. Some of those business people put on lavish displays of wealth with their mansions, yachts, and private jets. It's enough to make some people ask, is that fair when so many people are struggling? Is it too much money? The first point to realize is that free enterprise can't make everyone wealthy. No economic system can. We can't all be rich. It's just a fact of life we need to accept. But the second point is just as important. While making relatively few people rich, free enterprise brings countless others good incomes. It can help make everyone better off. A woman who founds and spends 20 years building a biotech company might, or might not, make a lot of money for herself, but along the way, her company provides jobs for its employees, jobs that otherwise would not exist. That's a very good thing. In this way, free enterprise has done more to employ people, lift them out of poverty, and improve their lives than any other economic system in history. Fine, you might say. Let some people make lots of money, but not that much money, not $10 million a year. The problem with this argument is that it raises the question, who gets to decide how much money people should make? The government? Should officials in Washington, D.C. have the power to decide how much that woman who built the biotech company with 20 years of hard work should make? Is that fair? Should a nameless bureaucrat get to decide how much you can make? If you take away people's chances to earn money and even make themselves rich, you take away much of their incentive to work hard, take risks, and launch new businesses. Do that, and people have much less reason to build companies like Apple, Google, and General Electric, or smaller companies like your local bank and hardware store. Then everyone loses, especially people who need jobs at those companies. Fans of free enterprise need to acknowledge that huge income gaps between a company's management and its workers can lead to resentment. That can be bad for the company and all involved. It's something corporations must keep in mind. People who make lots of money should remember, as St. Paul tells us, that God loveth a cheerful giver. It's also smart to remember that the Bible warns again and again of the dangers that wealth brings. As for those among us who don't make lots of money, it's good to remember that free enterprise offers the best opportunity to rise in the world and to make more money, perhaps even creating more jobs for others along the way. As Abraham Lincoln said, "The man who labored for another last year, this year labors for himself, and next year he will hire others to labor for him." Is free enterprise a moral system? Critics say that free enterprise causes greed and excessive ambition. It turns life into a vicious competition in which the ruthless and dishonest exploit others to come out ahead. In truth, sometimes people can and do act immorally in business, just as people sometimes act immorally in government or in their family lives. Human beings are imperfect creatures, and any system involving humans can lead to abuses and corruption. But we must weigh the good against the bad. Yes, free enterprise is driven largely by self-interest, as the moral philosopher Adam Smith pointed out in his great book, The Wealth of Nations, published in 1776. People are naturally interested in getting things they need and want for happy, comfortable lives. But self-interest is not the same as selfishness. We can be interested in improving our own lives while at the same time helping others. That's what most business owners do when they hire people or when they sell products that people want. They are helping others while they help themselves. In many ways, free enterprise can actually help us become better people because it encourages us to exercise several virtues. In work, we learn responsibility and reliability when tasked with projects large and small. We gain perseverance in meeting tough deadlines. We learn about cooperation in dealing with colleagues and about civility in relations with customers, employers, and employees. Entrepreneurs exercise creativity in coming up with new ideas. They develop habits of thrift in saving to start a business and dedication in getting it off the ground. Managers and employees alike learn the value of honesty, because the reality is that in the world of business, dishonesty is one of the surest ways to lose a business or get fired. That said, the main purpose of free enterprise is to help people prosper and have more comfortable lives, not maintain virtue. To make sure people act morally and treat each other fairly in a free enterprise system, we have to look outside of free enterprise itself. Government can help here. Laws that keep businesses from putting children to work or dumping chemicals in streams, for example, are good checks on free enterprise. As long as they don't hamper business with too much red tape, legislatures and courts can be businesses' allies in improving lives. More important than government, though, is culture. The morality of any society's economic system depends on the morality of its culture. A corrupt culture will produce corrupt enterprise and corrupt government. A decent culture will produce businesses that treat people well. That means our most important institutions, families, churches and other houses of worship, neighborhoods, schools, and communities, must help produce people of good character who make good employers and employees. It takes a lot of work to maintain a culture that keeps capitalism within moral bounds. In a world full of commercialism, attention to virtue helps keep money and the things it can buy in perspective. Calvin Coolidge, the 30th President of the United States, is famous for saying that the chief business of the American people is business. But he also reminded us that for all the prosperity that free enterprise has brought this country, without dedication to some deeper matters, it's all for nothing. The things of the Spirit come first, he said. Unless we cling to that, all our material prosperity, overwhelming though it may appear, will turn to a barren scepter in our grasp. Does socialism work? Socialism is a political and economic system in which the government controls the means of production, such as factories and land, and the distribution of income. In essence, government control replaces the free markets of capitalism. Virtually all Western nations, including the United States, have mixed economies, that is, economies that contain some elements of socialism mixed with free market capitalism. The mixture varies from nation to nation. Political debates often involve the question of how far government control over a nation's economy should go. Some people on the left are attracted to the idea of socialism because it promises more economic equality. Because government has more control over the economy, the theory goes, it can make sure workers receive a greater share of goods. The real-world record of nations that have veered toward socialism, however, is not good. One reason socialist countries have often failed is that it's virtually impossible for government officials, or for anyone, to plan and run an economy. Economies are enormously complex, made of countless interacting forces. No one fully understands how they work. Over time, centralized government control doesn't work well. More important, socialist countries take freedom away from people. Since the government assumes more control, individuals have fewer choices. If you have an idea to start a business and it doesn't fit into the government's plans, too bad for you. You might wait years for a permit to start that business, if it ever comes at all. Someone once said that the problem with socialism is socialism, while the problem with capitalism is capitalists. Capitalism, despite the good it does, is sometimes abused by people. Socialism, on the other hand, is itself a fundamentally flawed system. Socialism demoralizes people while making them dependent on the state. It promises equality, but in fact levels everyone down, except the ruling authorities, by taking away liberty. As Pope John Paul II wrote, "In the place of creative initiative there appears passivity, dependence, and submission to the bureaucratic apparatus which, as the only ordering and decision-making body, if not also the owner of the entire totality of goods and the means of production, puts everyone in a position of almost absolute dependence. This provokes a sense of frustration or desperation and predisposes people to opt out of national life." Cuba is a nearby socialist nation. A journalist on a recent visit wrote about the misery of most citizens and the luxurious lifestyles of the ruling class that controls the poor. Outside Havana's tourist district, the rest of the city looks as though it suffered a catastrophe on the scale of Hurricane Katrina or the Indonesian tsunami. Roofs have collapsed, walls are splitting apart, window glass is missing, paint has long vanished. It's eerily dark at night, almost entirely free of automobile traffic. It is filled with people struggling to eke out a life in the ruins. Free market economies, even with their flaws, are far better than the trap of socialism. What is crony capitalism, and what's wrong with it? In a free enterprise system, one of government's jobs is to make sure competing businesses all play by the same rules. Government shouldn't give some corporations special privileges and others not. Competition that's truly free and fair requires a level playing field. Unfortunately, modern American government tends to do this job badly. Big corporations often get too cozy with government officials. That can lead to special treatment known as crony capitalism. Under crony capitalism, businesses, usually big corporations or groups of corporations, hire lobbyists who work to pass laws and regulations that favor those businesses. This goes on a lot in Washington, D.C., in state houses across the country, and even at the local government level. Sometimes companies are looking for loans or grants. A corporation might go to its friends in government and say, "Look, we can create all kinds of jobs making this new product, but we'll need some help getting it off the ground. Can the government guarantee a loan for us?" That means taxpayers are taking a risk for that company, and if it fails, taxpayers are the ones who pay. A recent well-known example is Solyndra, a solar cell manufacturing company that went bankrupt in 2011 after getting a loan guarantee from the U.S. Department of Energy. The bankruptcy cost taxpayers hundreds of millions of dollars. Sometimes crony capitalism involves big corporations pushing for government regulations that make it tough for new businesses to enter their line of work. In other words, they use the government to protect themselves from new competition. Sometimes it involves corporations getting special tax breaks for themselves written into a law. There's nothing wrong with lower taxes, especially since America has one of the highest corporate tax rates in the world, but it's not fair when some businesses have to pay much more than others. And it makes people mad when they read about big corporations that manage to pay practically no taxes. Corporations that lobby the government in their own interests aren't breaking any laws. That's part of our democratic system. And there are times when it makes sense for government to extend a helping hand, especially if it's help that can boost the economy and get people to work. But rampant crony capitalism interferes with free enterprise, which depends on fair competition. It usually favors big corporations, which can afford to lobby government at the expense of smaller companies. That can keep entrepreneurs from launching small businesses and creating jobs. Crony capitalism rewards businesses based on connections and their ability to influence the government rather than the quality of their product or service. It inhibits competition, driving up the prices of goods for consumers. Corporations shouldn't get a government-supplied edge over competitors. Government should be on the side of fair and open competition. That's the best way to foster innovation and economic growth. Equality and opportunity. An economics professor got tired of hearing his students say that the United States is an unfair place and that the government ought to do something to make things more equal, lessons they had apparently learned in social studies class and on TV. "All right," the professor said, "we'll try a little experiment. From now on, all grades will be averaged. Everyone will receive the same grade, whatever that turns out to be. You can all be equal." After the first test, he averaged all the grades, and everyone got a B. The students who had studied hard were mad, but the students who had studied only a little were happy. As the second test approached, the students who had studied hard decided they wanted a free ride too. They didn't study as much this time. The students who had studied a little for the first test studied even less for the second. The average grade was a D. No one was happy. When the third test rolled around, the average was an F. As the tests proceeded, the grades never got any better. Bickering and blaming, however, were on the rise. At the end of the semester, the whole class failed. This story, which likely falls into the category of urban legend, appeared on the internet several years ago. Apocryphal or not, it's a great illustration for helping us think about what equality means and what conditions offer the best opportunities for true success. What does the Declaration of Independence mean by "all men are created equal"? Does it mean we should all get an equal start in life? No. Thomas Jefferson and the others who wrote the Declaration were realists. They knew that life isn't always fair and that people are born with different abilities. Some are born in very wealthy countries, some in impoverished countries. Even in the United States, some are born into rich families, some into poor. All men are created equal means that we're all born with the same fundamental rights. The founders called them natural rights, such as the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. By all men, the founders meant all humanity, although it took many years for the country to include women and people of color in its founding vision. The founders believed, as do most conservatives today, that these fundamental rights come from God. All people are endowed by their Creator with them, as the Declaration puts it. Government is not the source of our rights, but it plays a crucial role in protecting those rights with laws. We all stand equal before the nation's laws. We expect the government to treat us all in an even-handed manner. All men are created equal carries the idea that human life is something to be cherished. Since we are created by God in His image, there is something sacred about every human being. There is a dignity built into every individual who comes into this world, and each individual life has value. This doesn't mean everyone is worthy of equal respect. Those who regularly steal or lie or hurt others, for example, have forfeited their honor and sometimes their freedom. We certainly shouldn't esteem people like that. It does mean, however, that each life has worth and potential. The phrase, "all men are created equal," carries a moral obligation for us to treat one another with basic decency. Here in the United States, we may take that idea for granted, but there are large parts of the world where it isn't in force, where life is viewed as cheap and others' rights as expendable. Someone was once asked to summarize America in 3 words. "No privileged characters," he answered. That's a very American ideal. This country, at its best, is the land of equal rights and shared obligations. Why shouldn't government close the gap between the haves and the have-nots to make things equal? Most Americans, including most conservatives, believe in policies to help narrow the gap between rich and poor in limited ways. For example, they accept the general notion of a progressive tax system in which high-income earners pay a greater portion of their income to taxes than those who make less money, so long as the amount is within reason. Americans generally favor sensible programs to help raise poor people's standard of living and create opportunities for them to make more money. The problem comes when government goes over the line and promises to make things fair by taking from some and giving to others. Those rich people don't deserve all that money, some on the left argue. Government should use its power to even things out. Some nations have promised material equality, but the results have never been good. Communist governments tried it in the 20th century and failed on a massive scale. If you want to learn about the effects of communism, read about East Berlin and West Berlin during the Cold War. East Germany, including East Berlin, was a communist nation where everyone was supposed to share the wealth. East Berlin was a city of run-down buildings, drab stores, and crumbling roads. Families waited years for basic appliances like washing machines and refrigerators. West Berlin was an outpost of freedom inside East Germany, protected by the United States and its allies. It was a prosperous city with busy streets, stores, and cafes. So many East Berliners wanted to go to West Berlin that the communists had to build the Berlin Wall to keep people in, and they would shoot anyone who tried to go over it. Would you want to live in a place where the government tells you what and how much you can have? That's the only way to make things equal from a material standpoint. Think about what that would do to your hopes, your incentive to do your best. Government control of wealth in the name of equality has a predictable outcome. The people running the government and their friends end up doing quite well. George Orwell painted the picture in his classic book, Animal Farm. The animals took over the farm with the maxim, "all animals are equal." But as time passed and the pigs exerted more and more control, the maxim turned into, "all animals are equal, but some animals are more equal than others." This isn't to say that government should not help people who really need it, especially those who can't care for themselves. Of course it should. Americans want to use government in smart, effective ways to help fellow Americans who are struggling. For example, government can help ensure that children from disadvantaged families have access to nutritious food and a good education. Giving people a chance to make better lives for themselves is what this country is all about. Americans are also generous in helping without governmental involvement through churches and other charities. Happy is he who is kind to the poor, the book of Proverbs reminds us. But leveling society in the name of equality makes the state the master and individuals its servants. As the great British Prime Minister Winston Churchill observed, it's a good way to bring an equal sharing of miseries. What does the Declaration of Independence mean by the pursuit of happiness? The Declaration says that we are all endowed by our Creator with the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. In this case, happiness doesn't mean being cheerful or feeling good. We have to look to other sources to help us decipher exactly what the Declaration is getting at here. You'll often read that the pursuit of happiness really means the pursuit of property. That's because the English philosopher John Locke, whose writings influenced Thomas Jefferson and other American founders, wrote of the right of man to preserve his property, that is, his life, liberty, and estate. The founders believed that property rights are crucial for human liberty. People can't be free if they don't have the right to the fruits of their own labor. The founders also believed that having a little property, such as a home and land, helps make a person independent. By the pursuit of happiness, Jefferson included the idea of property rights, but he meant a broader concept as well. To understand it, we need to turn to the ancient Greeks, whom Jefferson had studied. The Greek word for happiness was eudaimonia, which includes the idea of personal well-being or flourishing. To the Greeks, being happy meant living a good life, not just in the sense of being comfortable and safe, but also in living a virtuous life. A person can't be truly happy without virtues such as self-control, honesty, and courage. The ancient Greeks also connected happiness with fulfilling one's potential. A good lyre player, for example, is happy when playing the lyre well. A computer scientist is happy working with computers, and a business person is happy making business deals. In other words, one's chosen work can bring happiness, whether it's paying work, volunteer work, or work at being a father or mother. The idea of the American dream is connected to the idea of the pursuit of happiness. The American dream means much more than owning a house, a car, and a big flat-screen TV. It means the chance to follow a dream, to work hard at turning a vision into something real. If Jefferson were alive today, he might say that the pursuit of happiness is something like the opportunity to reach one's fullest potential. The Declaration says we all have the God-given right to use our abilities to go as far as we can. There is no guarantee of a good life, but in America, there is the opportunity to strive for one morally, intellectually, and economically. What makes America the land of opportunity? There is no single ingredient to the formula. It's a mixture of several things. The first is liberty, including economic freedom. That freedom allows people to choose their own careers and put their talents to work. It allows them to profit from their own ideas and labor, to work for themselves if they want. Abraham Lincoln said, "This progress by which the poor, honest, industrious, and resolute man raises himself, that he may work on his own account and hire somebody else, is the great principle for which this government was really formed." Limited government that protects rights and freedoms is another important ingredient. For example, it is government's job to protect property rights, keep markets as free and fair as possible, and oppose discrimination in the workplace. Too much government, on the other hand, weighs down the economy with high taxes and costly regulations. That kills opportunity for individuals and businesses. National character is a third ingredient. The American spirit values business. It prizes inventiveness, entrepreneurship, and hard work. It also values education. Americans have always believed that education and opportunity go together. The moral character of the American people is crucial. Virtues like dealing honestly with others, wanting to do good work, and taking personal responsibility. Where those virtues don't exist, opportunity doesn't last. Families make a big difference. Family is the first and most important teacher of the character needed for success. It's where we first learn the virtues that go into making a healthy work ethic, virtues such as integrity, dedication, and perseverance. Talk to people who have had success, and they often say things like, "My dad taught me to never quit," or "My mom made me believe I could do it." Finally, strong communities are essential. Vibrant neighborhoods, churches, and civic groups like the local Chamber of Commerce or Lions Club are places where opportunity thrives. They form networks where you can look for jobs, build a reputation, and develop business relationships. These institutions, plus families, are the backbone of American opportunity. How do we increase opportunity in America? A lot of people worry that opportunity in America is on the decline. They worry that many of us don't have a good chance to climb the ladder of success, and that it will be even tougher for coming generations. Those on the left often say, "Let's fix things by taking money from the rich and redistributing it through government programs." But taking more money from wealthy people has a poor record in terms of increasing opportunity. It may satisfy envy or some people's sense of fairness, but income redistribution has done little to give people tools for long-term success. One good way to increase opportunity is to strengthen the foundations of the economy. The better the economy, the better your chances of getting a good job. That does more for upward mobility than any big government program. Government can help fuel economic growth with policies that support free enterprise and don't slow businesses down with too much regulation. Improving education and combating the breakdown of the American family are crucial long-term strategies as well. The best way to improve opportunity in America may be something that doesn't involve government at all. It's a formula for getting ahead called the success sequence. Social scientists, economists, and people with common sense have known about it for a long time. Follow these steps in the right order, and your chances of getting ahead are good. Here's the sequence. 1. Finish high school. A college degree is even better, but at least finish high school. 2. Get a job. It doesn't have to be a dream job you'll have forever, simply a full-time job, one you're qualified for. 3. Get married. Yes, marriage is good for financial success. 4. Have babies and start to raise them after you get married. That's it. Get an education, get a job, get married, and start a family, in that order. If everybody in America followed this path, studies show that the poverty rate would plummet. Stick to that sequence, and you vastly increase your access to the American dream. This solution calls for personal responsibility. Following the success sequence is easier said than done. Steps like finishing a degree and getting a job are big ones. They take perseverance. Keeping a marriage healthy and raising children are even bigger challenges. But if more Americans get back to following that route, this country will still be the land of opportunity. Energy and the environment. The first Earth Day was observed in 1970. It was, in the words of famed CBS anchorman Walter Cronkite, a day set aside for a nationwide outpouring of mankind seeking its own survival. Its message about saving the Earth was simple: act or die. Around that time, news reports were full of catastrophic warnings. Colder winters herald dawn of new ice age. Scientists see ice age in the future. Headline from the Washington Post, January 11, 1970. Dr. S. Dillon Ripley, Secretary of the Smithsonian Institute, believes that in 25 years, somewhere between 75 and 80% of all the species of living animals will be extinct. Senator Gaylord Nelson, Look magazine, April 1970. By 1985, air pollution will have reduced the amount of sunlight reaching Earth by 1/2. Life magazine, January 1970. By the year 2000, if present trends continue, we will be using up crude oil at such a rate that there won't be any more crude oil. You'll drive up to the pump and say, "Fill her up, buddy," and he'll say, "I'm very sorry, there isn't any." Ecologist Kenneth Watt, Time Magazine, February 2, 1970. None of those predictions came true, but the alarmist warnings have continued for decades now. A 2014 Earth Day Network website told us, "The fight against climate change is at an impasse, and life on Earth hangs in the balance. Help us save polar bears and other wildlife as their habitats disappear and their food sources become scarce. Like the polar bear, human life is under threat too. Storms are becoming stronger, droughts are becoming more severe, and rising sea levels encroach on our cities." Protecting the environment is serious business, but dire statements like these aren't. This is an area where you have to be skeptical of radical claims, examine the evidence, and use common sense. Energy, environmental, and free enterprise issues are tightly intertwined. Free enterprise, after all, requires building, trading, and moving things. That consumes energy and affects the environment. It takes some thoughtful balancing to encourage economic growth, look after the earth, and use energy wisely. It also makes for lively political debate. Why don't conservatives care about the environment? A listener to Bill Bennett's Morning in America recently called from Tampa Bay, Florida, to describe an environmental studies lesson in his son's high school. The teacher treated the students to a PowerPoint presentation on environmental history, showing a picture of President Ronald Reagan with a speech bubble containing the words, "I hate Earth," coming out of his mouth. That's a message some liberals want people to believe. Conservatives don't care about the environment. It's an absurd claim. Nobody wants to breathe dirty air or drink foul water. Conservatives want to preserve the environment for future generations as much as anyone else. Conservation and conservatism share the same Latin root, conservare, meaning to preserve and keep safe. Unlike radical environmentalists, conservatives don't believe that human activity is essentially bad for the planet. They support good stewardship of the earth while putting its resources to work in smart, efficient ways that benefit people. Environmentalism has done much good for the world, and sensible laws are certainly necessary to help protect the earth. But some environmentalists are so zealous, they forget to take people's well-being into account. Their views about energy are a good example. Radical environmentalists are up in arms about oil wells and oil pipelines. They condemn drilling for natural gas, especially hydraulic fracking. They don't like coal-burning plants, even ones that use clean coal technology. They oppose construction of nuclear plants. But people need energy, and without any of those options, we'd all be in very bad shape. People in poor, developing countries especially need such energy. More than 1.2 billion people around the world lack access to electricity. Another 2.8 billion use fuels like wood, charcoal, and animal dung to cook, fuels that have negative health and environmental consequences. Ironic as it may seem, the modern hydrocarbon energy that environmentalists so dislike is the path to cleaner, healthier conditions in the developing world. The most extreme environmentalists are anti-business and anti-economic development. They believe that free enterprise and industrialism are natural enemies of the environment. Many are socialists at heart. They think that free enterprise is inherently unfair because it leaves some people with more than others. They use environmental regulations to limit commerce and grow centralized government. Conservatives believe that free enterprise, used wisely, can go hand in hand with preserving the environment. New technologies made possible by free enterprise can be used to solve environmental problems. For example, improved automobile technology has reduced tailpipe emissions by 95% since 1970. Good stewardship of the earth and its resources, not an anti-people, anti-business attitude, is the sensible approach to take. Is oil evil? No. On balance, oil and other fossil fuels have brought tremendous improvements to people's lives. They've made it possible to feed, clothe, house, and transport billions. Search online for list of petroleum-based products and take a look. It's virtually everything we use around our homes, offices, and schools, from deodorant to computer parts to medicines. Some on the left have turned oil into a symbol of everything they don't like about Western culture and capitalism in particular. To them, oil, natural gas, and coal stand for pollution and global warming, or climate change as it's often called. Oil equals capitalism and industrialization, which equal inequality and environmental wreckage. The left often paints big oil as a bunch of greedy, callous corporations out to wreck the planet for profit. It's not an accurate or fair portrayal. Oil companies aren't perfect, no corporations are, and there was a time when they were bad about taking care of the environment. But things have changed, and people in the industry generally do a good job of using new technologies to minimize the impact on the earth while providing a valuable service. For example, oil and gas companies can now drill sideways, which allows them to drill several wells in different directions from one spot, leaving a smaller footprint on the surface. The bottom line is this: at present, there is no workable replacement for fossil fuels. The world needs them to keep economies going. Green alternatives, like solar and wind power, are too inefficient, unreliable, and costly to take their place anytime soon. Someday, technology advances will surely make fossil fuels unnecessary, but for the foreseeable future, we need them. Without fossil fuels, the world would face economic depression and mass starvation. Not long ago, experts were predicting that the world would soon run out of fossil fuels. What they didn't foresee was that new technologies would make vast oil and natural gas fields accessible. Thanks to that technology, the United States became the world's leading natural gas producer in 2010 and leading oil producer in 2014. America needs to develop all its available energy sources, including its oil and gas fields, and to do it in a responsible way. Those resources create jobs and play a big role in keeping the economy healthy. They help keep transportation costs down and reduce dependence on foreign oil. Using resources wisely, always considering the environment, makes more sense than demonizing them. Isn't it nuts to be skeptical about global warming? When it comes to new scientific ideas, skepticism is a healthy attitude to take. In fact, good science demands the kind of skepticism that says, "Show me some proof." As the late astronomer Carl Sagan used to say, extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. We shouldn't simply reject out of hand the idea that human activity is causing dangerous global warming. The implications are too serious. By the same token, we shouldn't accept the idea of global warming just because others say so. The left has gone to great lengths to persuade people not to question the idea. We're told that the debate is over, that man-caused global warming is a fact, that the results will definitely be catastrophic unless we do something about it. Skeptics are called deniers, an epithet similar to Holocaust deniers, people who deny that genocide against Jews took place during World War II. For example, former Vice President Al Gore has likened raging deniers to racists, supporters of apartheid, slaveholders, homophobes, and alcoholics. Environmental activist Robert F. Kennedy Jr. has said that politicians who say that global warming doesn't exist are contemptible human beings, and that, "I wish there were a law you could punish them under." It's worth remembering that when people try to shut down debate, it's often a sign they don't think they can win that debate. Here are some questions worth investigating before making up your mind on this issue. Is the Earth in fact warming? If so, by how much? Has it warmed and cooled in times past? Do we really know what causes warming? Is it definitely attributable to man? Have past predictions about climate changes been accurate? Lots of money and politics are mixed into this issue. People saying, we need to spend billions on this, and we need to pass laws about that. Anytime money and politics are involved, it's definitely smart to ask questions. Is the science on global warming really settled? It's by no means settled, despite what climate change activists and liberal politicians would have you believe. They often say things like, 97% of the world's scientists agree that climate change is real, man-made, and dangerous. In fact, there is no reliable survey of scientists showing that 97% believe that. For every claim that scientists agree about the causes and dangers of global warming, you can find a claim that they don't agree. For example, one study found that only 36% of professional geoscientists and engineers believe that global warming is mainly caused by humans and is dangerous. Here's what scientists do seem to agree about. There is complete agreement that climate change is happening. That's simply because the Earth's climate is always changing. Throughout history, it has always been warming or cooling. There is broad agreement that the world's climate warmed during the 20th century. There is also broad agreement that humans affect the climate. With so many people, cars, factories, engines, and other machines on Earth, it's difficult to see how we could not affect it in some way. Beyond that, the consensus breaks down. There is no widespread agreement on crucial points like how much the Earth may continue to warm, what causes warming, how much of a role human activity plays, and what sort of threat warming might pose. Dr. Stephen E. Koonin is a distinguished theoretical physicist who served as Undersecretary for Science at the U.S. Department of Energy during the Obama administration. He takes the issue of climate change seriously. Like many scientists, he regards claims of climate science being settled as, to use his word, misguided. As he points out, the Earth's climate is incredibly complex, and scientists don't fully understand it. That makes it very hard to predict what it will be like in coming decades and how much human activity will affect it. Dr. Koonin writes, while the past 2 decades have seen progress in climate science, the field is not yet mature enough to usefully answer the difficult and important questions being asked of it. This decidedly unsettled state highlights what should be obvious. Understanding climate at the level of detail relevant to human influences is a very, very difficult problem. Those who claim that the science is settled on this issue are making a political statement to suit their agenda. They are being anything but scientific. What are some problems with global warming theories? The main problem with the theory that humans are causing dangerous global warming is that scientists don't understand enough about the complexities of the Earth's climate to draw firm conclusions or make predictions with anything near certainty. There are several specific problems as well. Here are 4. The climate has been warming and cooling for ages. There is no doubt about that. The Earth's climate has gone through cycles of warming and cooling since long before the factories and cars of the industrial age came along. This raises an obvious and common-sense question. Are the climate changes we see today simply part of a natural process that has been going on for a very long time? We don't really know how humans influence the climate. Projections are that human activity will add enough carbon dioxide to the atmosphere by the middle of the 21st century to directly shift its natural greenhouse effect by only 1 to 2%. It's extremely difficult for anyone to say what such a small change means for the climate. Since we don't fully understand the natural causes of climate change, it's virtually impossible for scientists to know how much human activity really affects it. Global warming computer models don't match a lot of what's going on in the world around us. For example, global warming has basically come to a halt for the better part of 2 decades, despite computer models' predictions. The models also failed to predict record-high growth of Antarctic sea ice. They fail to explain why 70 years ago seas were rising at the same rate they are today, even though human influence on the climate was smaller then. Global warming has become a non-falsifiable theory. People who insist that it's a human-caused threat tend to point to just about everything as evidence. When the climate warms, it's because of global warming. When the climate doesn't warm, it's merely a pause. Warm winters, cold winters, floods, droughts, lots of snow, little snow, severe storms, they're all said to be the results of global warming. Everything proves it. Nothing disproves it. That's called a non-falsifiable theory. At that point, global warming is an ideology, not science. News reports about global warming rarely mention these problems with the theory. In fact, they tend to ignore them. For example, journalists regularly write stories announcing that the previous year was the hottest year ever or one of the warmest ever recorded. What most of those stories don't tell you is that such claims are based on temperature readings taken at the Earth's surface, which are not always reliable, and that the recorded temperature increases are so small it's hard to tell if they mean anything at all. The stories also don't tell you that atmospheric temperatures measured by satellites, which offer a more reliable measurement, show no evidence of significant warming in recent years. Global warming activists haven't helped their cause with shrill predictions over the years. For example, in 1989, a senior official at the United Nations predicted that entire nations could be wiped off the face of Earth by rising sea levels if the global warming trend is not reversed by the year 2000. He also predicted that coastal flooding and crop failures would create an exodus of eco-refugees, threatening political chaos. Prophecies like that have turned out to be nothing more than hot greenhouse gas. Even if we're not sure about global warming, doesn't it make sense to play it safe and cut back on greenhouse gas emissions? If playing it safe means enacting sensible policies about using energy cleanly and efficiently and developing new energy sources, the answer is yes. But if playing it safe means the United States should slow industrialization, impose carbon taxes on people and businesses, spend lots of government money on inefficient green energies, and slash the use of oil and other fossil fuels with no viable alternatives in sight, most conservatives say no. Here's why. Government policies that say, we're going to use taxes and regulations to force everyone to cut back on fossil fuel use, hurt the U.S. economy. Those policies result in more expensive energy, which costs jobs and drives up the cost of goods. That makes life harder for people. Even if the United States took on the tremendous expense of significantly cutting back greenhouse gas emissions, it would have no effect on climate change. That's because developing countries like China and India produce large amounts of greenhouse gas. They depend largely on coal and other fossil fuels to grow their economies. No matter what the United States does, developing countries have little interest in slowing down their energy use for understandable reasons. Cutting greenhouse emissions in developing countries would hurt people there. Many of those countries are focused on lifting people out of poverty, supplying them with basics like electricity and drinkable water. Pushing them off fossil fuels makes their energy more expensive, and that means less food, less electricity, more disease, shorter lives, and prolonged poverty. You should understand that for many liberals, the issue of climate change is a way to expand the power of government in order to reshape the world to fit their vision. As one global warming activist has written, the climate crisis is precisely the giant lever with which we can, following Archimedes, move the world in a greener, more equitable direction. Liberals are saying, in effect, trust us, government needs to tax your energy use more. Government needs to regulate the kind and amount of energy you use to save the world from disaster. That gives government an astounding amount of control over economies and people's lives. Being attentive to the health of the environment is one thing. Using predictions of climate catastrophe to drive a left-wing political agenda is another. Part 2. Limited government. Congressman Paul Ryan of Wisconsin tells the story of Chrissy, a constituent who was 17 years old and very sick when he first met her. She had a life-threatening heart condition and needed a special pacemaker. The device was available in Europe, and a company was willing to send it from France. But there was a big catch. The U.S. government had not approved the device for use here. Chrissy's mom did everything she could to get a waiver from the Food and Drug Administration so she could get the pacemaker into the country, with no success. Her request was trapped somewhere in the bureaucracy. Meanwhile, Chrissy's life was ebbing away. With nowhere else to turn, Chrissy's mom walked into Congressman Ryan's district office in Wisconsin crying. Ryan managed to get the head of the FDA on the phone and told him he would not take no for an answer. 15 minutes later, the FDA called back. The waiver would be approved. Today, Chrissy is a nurse and living a full life. But what about all of the other people trapped in or turned away by our growing federal bureaucracy? Ryan asks. This is the heart of the question. Is a huge, bloated government that holds so much power over our lives really one that helps people the most? Or is it slowly draining away the strengths and ideals that have made this country great? One thing is for certain. It is not the kind of government this nation's founders had in mind. Do conservatives hate government? No, conservatives don't hate government, despite what the media and liberals sometimes imply. People who don't want government are anarchists, not conservatives. Conservatives are opposed to big government that overtaxes and overregulates. The kind of government that, as the late British Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher used to say, takes too much from you in order to do too much for you. They're opposed to bad government that wastes money and runs poorly. But conservatives are certainly not opposed to government in general. Government of the people, by the people, for the people, as Abraham Lincoln put it in the Gettysburg Address, is a good thing. We all need government to carry out responsibilities such as making and enforcing laws, protecting people's rights, and defending us from foreign enemies. We need it to do things like protect the environment and make sure the food we buy is safe to eat. Conservatives are proud of the system of limited government that America gave the world with the United States Constitution in 1787. Our Constitution is still a miracle of sorts. It is arguably the greatest political document in history. It created a new kind of government, one that did away with the tyranny of kings. President Ronald Reagan put it this way in his farewell address to the nation in 1989. Ours was the first revolution in the history of mankind that truly reversed the course of government, and with 3 little words, we the people. We the people tell the government what to do. It doesn't tell us. We the people are the driver. The government is the car. And we decide where it should go, and by what route, and how fast. Almost all the world's constitutions are documents in which governments tell the people what their privileges are. Our Constitution is a document in which we the people tell the government what it is allowed to do. Conservatives want a federal government that actually listens to we the people. They want government that is vigorous about helping people solve problems instead of burdening them with more regulations and bureaucracy. They want a strong government, but a limited one. They want a limited government, but strong. Conservatives want the federal government to be especially strong in jobs that only it can do, like providing for the country's defense. As Alexander Hamilton put it, whenever the government appears in arms, it ought to appear like a Hercules and inspire respect by the display of strength. There are many jobs it makes sense for the federal government to take part in, like providing a safety net for the poor and help for elderly Americans who need it. For those important tasks, conservatives want smart, energetic government that gets the job right. What they don't want is government that spends a lot, wastes a lot, and in the end gets poor results for rich and poor alike. What does limited government mean? Limited government